Hope I can remember the words. I spent a year in Memphis and never got a band. I spent a year in Florida and never got a tan. I spent a year in a monastery, rehab for the crooks. I spent a year at Hugh Hefner's house 'cause the city liked my looks. I spent a year in India and never saw my soul. I spent a year in Milwaukee and I never got to bowl. I guess you could say I wasted time, and I'm still a couple years behind. And it's gotten me wondering tonight, man, where have I been all my life? I spent a year in San Francisco hiding at the moon, me and the senorita drunk inside a dirty room. I spent a year in Monte Carlo and never won a chip. I spent a year in dance class and never learned to dip. I spent a year in therapy and never learned to grow. I spent a year in Vegas and I never saw a show. I guess you could say I wasted time, and I'm still a couple years behind. I could have seen Celine Dion twice. Man, where have I been all my life? I spent a year in Paris, but I never learned to cook. I spent a year in college and never cracked a book. I spent a year in Hong Kong and never learned Chinese. I spent a year in love where you either burn or freeze. I spent a year in Hollywood and never made a splash. I spent a year in Nashville without meeting Johnny Cash. I guess you could say I wasted time, and I'm still a couple years behind. I now ought to have me a home and a wife. Man, where have I been all my life? I spent a year in Tampa and never saw the bay. I spent a year in Palm Beach and never learned croquet. I spent a year in driving school and never learned to steer. I spent a year in danger and I never learned to fear. I spent a year in Texas and never learned to fight. I spent a year with Jerry Falwell and I never saw the light. I guess you could say I wasted time, and I'm still a couple years behind. Man, I'm trying to keep my recollections right. Man, where have I been all my life? I spent a year in England and never saw Big Ben. I spent a year in Siam and I never found my twin. So I think I'm going back beneath that California moon. Find one more senorita, clean up my dirty room. Maybe take her back to Mexico where the clay roads twist and turn. Check in the Hotel Juarez and love her till she burns. And I swear I will make her my wife. And she says, where have you been all my life? Where have I been? Man, where have I been all my life?